let's go through them from the top. The verbs are wakes, breaking, wombing, pushing, surfacing, comes. Oh, hold on, now we're starting to notice something. If this poem pivots on a central point, which is that pause, the verb before the pause, the verb before the pivot is what? Comes, yeah. Do we know what mathematical term that is? Do we know what mathematical term? No, for two things that balance. Yeah.
Head to something.
Well, there's kind of a symmetrical feel to this, isn't there? Let's think about the mood of the second half of the poem. It makes sense for the verbs wakes, breaking, wombing, pushing, you know, really active verbs to be in this fantastic dream where he's waking up in the Caribbean. Do these verbs seem right? Surge, roar, waves. Yeah. In the second half of the poem, when he's back in London, are the verbs right?
No.
How? Explain.
He's using descriptive, like, adjectives that you would find in Ireland, and he's kind of bringing them back.
He's bringing the stuff from the island into
London.
Fantastic. That's exactly it. If you have a look, surge relates to the sea. Surge is something you see the sea in the Caribbean doing. Roar would be the sound of the sea. Waves, you find them in the sea, don't you? She's deliberately transplanting the actions from the Caribbean, the verbs from the Caribbean, putting them into London. And the fact that they're in there and they look so stupid is an emblem of what? Comedy. Well, it's got a comedic impact, definitely. Anyone got an idea why they've deliberately put verbs that look like the seaside verbs into the London bit? Because they're out of place, aren't they? Yes?
She don't feel home in London, like, sort of, the Caribbean is where she belongs.
Yes, that's the whole of the message to the poem. Why has she put verbs in there from the Caribbean which are out of place into the second half? There's an ironic effect. You've got an idea?
Because she still hasn't gotten over that she's not there. She's still using words like, still imagining that she is there.
Yeah, so even kind of the language of her thoughts is still Caribbean. Yes, you had an idea?
It could signify that the poet is suffering from, is dealing with London in a more nostalgic way.
Absolutely, yeah, there's nostalgia, and that's with the language in her thoughts.
She feels she doesn't fit into this lifestyle.
You're right. The language in the second half, the seaside language in the second half is out of place. How does the protagonist of the poem feel in London? Absolutely, out of place. So the language reflects how the protagonist feels. The verbs, the ing verbs, see how many there are. You got breaking, wombing, pushing, surfacing, muffling in the second half. The ing verbs are a specific tense called the present continuous. There's no end to it. There's no end to those ing verbs. And I'm just kind of throwing that in. What does anybody make of it?
This day is continuous, and she's never going to get back to the Caribbean. She has to live the London life.
It's a good answer. However, most of the verbs, most of the present continuous verbs are actually in the Caribbean section.
I mean that she's never going to get, like, over Caribbean. She still dreams of it, but wakes up to reality in London or something.
Do you think this is the first time she's ever had this dream?
No.
Yeah. Every single night, and deliberately using the present continuous tense, breaking, wombing, pushing. It shows kind of the repetitive pattern of this dream. Have a look at lines 15 to 17. How many times is the U sound, the in there? 15 to 17 in those 3 lines. 4, yeah. What is the emotional mood what's the mood of the person when they're waking up and finding, I'm in London? Groggy, disappointed. Again, I think the poet's deliberately made a choice there in those repetitive sounds. Is a happy noise? No. It sure ain't. No, can I ask you to stand up and give us your reading of Island Man?
Morning, and the island man wakes up to the sound of the blue surf in his head, the steady breaking and warming, wild seabirds and fishermen pushing out to sea, the sun surfacing defiantly. From the east of his small emerald island, he always comes back. Groggily, groggily, comes back to the sands of the grey metallic shore, to surge of wheels, to dull, no circular roar. Muffling, muffling, his crumpled pillow waves. Island man hears himself another London day.
Pick up your cans. And your pencils. Okay. You start it, you stand up. So it'll be 3, 4, 3, 4. Yeah? You've all got to fit in with the beat that she gives, so don't start too quickly, tune into it first. Okay, stop. Can you hold down that beat again? So you start it off. Right, I'm going to read the blessing. The skin... Right, it's too... The beat's too fast, so let's go... Sorry, what's your name? Aisha. Let Aisha start it off a little bit slower. The skin cracks like a pod. There never is enough water. Imagine the drip of it, the small splash echo in a tin mug, the voice of a kindly God. Stop. Right, try it again with just Aisha doing it. Alam, could you read the first bit out of the blessing, please, while Aisha's doing it?
The skin cracks like a pod. There is never enough water. Imagine the drip of it, the small splash echo in a tin mug, the voice of a kindly God.
Okay. The skin cracks like a pod. There never is enough water. Imagine the drip of it, the small splash echo in a tin mug, the voice of a kindly God. Right, just listen to Aisha again. Look at the first 6 lines of the poem. What's the poem about? Water? Drought. This poem is unequivocally about drought and a shortage of water. It has a meter underneath it, a very obvious meter, which sounds like...
Water dripping in the can.
Yeah. Can you hear it? The meter of this poem is exactly the same as a dripping tap. The skin cracks like a pod. There never is enough water. And you can feel the beat under it. And the beat is deliberately exactly the same as a dripping tap. Imagine the drip of it, the small splash echo in a tin mug. The meter actually represents this splash, the echo in a tin mug. It's a fantastic piece of poetry, this. And it changes. From line 7, the meter completely changes. Sometimes a sudden rush of fortune. I'd like you, please, to go through it in your pairs and decide the exact point, the exact word that the meter changes from a slow dripping tap through to a burst pipe. The exact word, I want you to decide. Go. Okay, has anybody identified the exact word yet? Rush, well done. Fantastic. Right, what's your name?
Julian.
Julian.
Julian, yeah.
Julian. Right, Julian's going to give us a go with the drummer. Because, again, this very... You're going to have to stand up front, Jules. Very, very similarly to Island Man, only the exact reverse. Island Man starts off with an incredibly fast up-tempo meter, pivots on a gap, and then goes to a slow meter. Blessing starts on a dripping tap meter, and on the word rush, when the pipe bursts, it goes mental. Let's see how he does.
The skin cracks like a pod. There's never enough water. Imagine the drip of it, the small splash, echo in a tin mug, the voice of a kindly God. Sometimes the sudden rush of fortune, municipal pipe burst into the silver, crash into the ground, and the flow has no found of raw tongues from the hurts of congregants. Every man, woman, child, the streets around, butts in with pots, brass, copper, aluminium, plastic buckets, frantic hands and naked children, screaming in the liquid sun, their highlights polished in perfection, flashing lights and the blessing signs all over their small bones.
That was way better than I could have dreamed of. Fantastic. Take a seat. Really, really good. How many times in the first line is that k consonant sound in there? 3 times. Right, so it's the skin cracks like a pod. Now, what does that line mean? It's the skin of what? Could be a person's skin. More likely, I see a picture of the soil. Yeah, because we're in a time of drought. Now think of the k sound 4 times in that first line. K, k, k. It's onomatopoeic. Why is he using the k sound in a thing about things drying out?
Just emphasising how devastated the land is and how there's no water.
Yeah, how does a k sound relate to the fact that there's fissures appearing in the earth as it's getting drier?
The k sound is more of a hard sound, just like the soil is without the water.
That's a very, very, very good answer. It's not the one I was looking for, but it's better. Anybody else?
It helps you to hear the ground cracking kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the same sound. As ground cracks, what sounds it make? Good, don't go. Brooke, could you stand up for us, please? Give us your rendition of the blessing.
The skin cracks like a pod. There never is enough water. Imagine the drip of it, the small splash echo in a tin mug, the voice of a kindly God. Sometimes the sudden rush of fortune, the municipal pipe bursts, silver crashes to the ground, and the flow is found a roar of tongues from the huts. A congregation, every man, woman, child, the streets around, butts in with pots, brass, copper, aluminium, plastic buckets, frantic hands, and naked children screaming in the liquid sun, their highlights polished to perfection, flashing light as the blessing sings over their small bones.